Yes, I know it's been a while, but it just doesn't make sense to release a review a week late, so I rather embrace it and test the phone thoroughly. And now that the OnePlus 8 Pro is also a much more expensive phone, I have to ask the question, can it possibly be worth it? Hey, I'm Brian and this is my OnePlus 8 Pro review. Design. Not much has changed from the 7 Pro and the 7T Pro in the design department. It's just a little bit more refined with more square corners, almost no bezel and a hole punch instead of a pop-up selfie camera. I personally don't really mind that, especially because it finally means that the 8 Pro has an IP certification, so you don't have to be afraid of getting it wet. The camera bump on the back is also now significantly larger and makes the phone rock on a table even more. But for one, you can counteract that with the included case, and two, it's a trade-off that might be more than worth it. More to that later. They also made the already very premium vibration motor even better. What I unexpectedly really like is the glacial green color, even though I don't really like green. And that's probably because under most circumstances, it's actually more of a light blue and not green. In person it's more similar to the 7T. And the glass is also matte, so it doesn't attract fingerprints. The 8 Pro still has the handy alert slider alongside the super tactile buttons, and also some very good stereo speakers to add to the awesome media experience. Speaking of which, display. This is the best phone screen I ever used. Period. The 120Hz refresh rate just adds so much. But the difference to 90Hz is much less noticeable than the jump from 60 to 90Hz. Still, it's very welcome. Scrolling, which, let's face it, you do a lot, just becomes a breeze. It's just plain fun to watch animations on this phone. And the best thing is that the high refresh rate even works at the full 2.5K resolution. Colors are beautiful too, and the screen is blindingly bright, which also helps with the HDR10 support. I just wish that OnePlus would have reduced the edges a bit. Yes, they look cool and they are not as bad as on some other phones, but I still don't prefer the slight distortion they produce. You probably also heard about the mispresses on this screen, and while it's better than it used to be, it's still annoying while typing. I'm happy to report though that my screen doesn't have any green tint issues. Performance. I have the 128GB version of this phone, and now some of you might be confused because OnePlus doesn't actually sell that configuration in green. But as it turns out, in China you can get all colors in all storage configurations. So if you want the cheaper version in green, or a black phone with more storage, importing it, for example through Trading Shenzhen, is not a bad option. Paired with that 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, or 12 and 256GB if you go for the higher end model, is of course the Snapdragon 865 that I kind of have a love-hate relationship with. On the one hand, it of course makes the phone super fast. As you would expect from OnePlus, this phone just flies through the UI. But to be honest, we've reached a point of diminishing return and I can't really perceive a difference to the 855 Plus if you count out the 120Hz display. That's not a bad thing. This phone is still the fastest Android phone around, and basically never having to wait for something to load is great. But on the other hand, the Snapdragon 865 always has to be paired with a 5G modem, which is really expensive. In turn, making phones with this chip really expensive too. I say this because I think we're still some time away from 5G becoming a necessity, but I guess it's nice to have if you plan on holding onto the phone for a couple of years. I don't live in a 5G area by the way, so I couldn't test it. And my 5G capable SIM is an eSIM anyway, which the 8 Pro, granted like almost every other phone, still doesn't support. Software. For this I kind of feel like a broken record at this point. OxygenOS is still the best Android skin there is. I really like stock Android, and this is that with only some very useful additions and tons of customizations. I just wish there was a 90Hz option for the refresh rate to save some battery. And there is still no always on display, which I'm going to keep complaining about until it's there. At least OnePlus announced that it's coming. It would definitely make the fastest under-screen fingerprint sensor even faster because you wouldn't have to tap to wake the screen first. The instant face unlock, also always a great feature on past OnePlus phones, is also back thanks to the hole punch selfie camera. Camera. Did I say camera? The camera was honestly what I was most curious about when I first saw the 8 Pro. That's because OnePlus's cameras have always been fine, but just never quite at the same level as the Pixel or the iPhone. But now, also thanks to a few updates after launch, I can say that it's finally up there. And that's great, because it's the only thing that was keeping me from using a OnePlus phone as my only daily driver. The 8 Pro has a main 48MP IMX689 sensor, a wide angle, also at 48 megapixels, an 8MP 3x telephoto, and that fourth 5MP infrared camera OnePlus disguises as a color filter. We'll get to that, but let's talk normal photos first. OnePlus has really done a lot with their processing. Dynamic range is good without overexposing, colors are a lot more natural than in the past, even if they still lean a bit into the more warm and saturated range, but not close to as much as on Samsung, and the pictures also have much more contrast now. I still often prefer the photos from the Pixel in terms of their even more contrasty looks, but it honestly comes close to being a preference at that point. Unfortunately, there's still no Gcam mod. I think though that a lot of people might even prefer the 8 Pro's photos, since the colors are more punchy out of the box, especially good for food photography. Because of the very big sensor, there's also some very nice depth of field. And I'm especially impressed by the ultra-wide camera, which does come close to the main sensor on a lot of occasions. The zoom is still a bit soft though, the S20 Ultra is the gold standard there. Low-light shots are also quite amazing. The night mode is definitely up there and can pull a lot of detail and colors even out of very dark scenes. Let's also talk about the infrared camera real quick. You probably already know that you can use it to look through plastic. And I also do believe that OnePlus originally wanted to market this as a feature, but then realized too late that seeing through plastic also means seeing through some synthetic clothing, and thus buried it in the camera settings so it wouldn't cause controversy, which it still did. Mr. Who's the Boss has a good video on this. But I think as long as you use it responsibly, it's a cool feature, even if the photo quality from it is garbage. Video quality is very nice, good stabilization, natural colors, but it can't quite beat the iPhone, even if the gap is getting slimmer. What disappointed me a bit was the quality of the selfie camera. It seems to blow up the shadows too much and also struggles a lot with natural skin tones. I only take selfies for videos though, so I don't really care. Overall, because the 8 Pro has an ultra-wide camera, which the Pixel does not, I would honestly say that this is the best camera package you can get on Android. I say on Android because if you take video and the slight edge in photo quality into account, the iPhone still is a bit better. Battery. Because of the 120Hz screen, battery life has been pretty average. I get about 4 to 5 hours of screen on time with the screen at 2.5K and 120Hz. This means that more than a day at these settings is not possible. You can of course turn things down to 1080p, which extends battery life by another 1 to 2 hours, but charging every morning is a price I'm willing to pay for this screen. Speaking of charging, of course you can still charge the battery super fast to about 70% in only half an hour over the cable. But now, finally, you can also do it wirelessly. I've missed this for so long on OnePlus phones, and now it's even possible at almost the same speed as with the cable. It's about 10 to 20% slower in practice. I really love that feature, and the wireless warp charger has a set place on my desk. It's also good that I can just quickly put the phone on there in the morning while getting ready, because the fan is too annoying to keep it running for longer. And why is the cable permanently attached? At night the fan does turn off though, and you can also just charge it on any old G-pad, albeit a lot slower. And reverse charging is there too. This phone really has it all, doesn't it? Well, except maybe for the headphone jack. Conclusion. Historically, OnePlus phones have not only been a good choice for enthusiasts because of their speed, but also just for normal people who wanted a really good phone at a good price. And that's still true for the 7T for example, but not for the 8 Pro. And I don't buy the argument that it's still cheaper than an S20 Ultra as a way out. This is now a proper flagship with a high price to match. But that doesn't really matter. If you need this much smartphone in your life, this is the best option out there. The display is the best, performance is the best, charging is the best. It checks all the boxes for water resistance, wireless charging and stereo speakers. And now finally the camera can sit with the other flagships too. Just battery life suffers a bit. It's excessive, but in a good way, unlike the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra. Get subscribed so you don't miss that video. If you want all that, then buy it. I would say it's worth it. But most people probably don't and would be just fine with an iPhone 11 or a OnePlus 7T, for example. If you enjoyed this video, you know which buttons to press. Don't forget to press that follow button on Twitter, and don't forget to stay home and stay healthy. I'm Brian, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.